Attention, you're listening to the Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here is your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
All right, my friends, we are back at it today. I was out last week. You know that because I wasn't behind the microphone last week. We had guest hosts, and I just want to say thank you to each one of those, to John Crane, to Chris Dunham, to Gary Varvel, and to Tony Reffett for filling in for us here on the program last week. And it was a much needed time to recharge here, and I appreciate you allowing me to step away from the microphone here for a week. But we're back at it, and of course, there is a lot to go through. Of course, with the strikes in Iran over the weekend, taking out the Supreme Leader, the Ayatollah, and I just want to go through this today. There's a lot as I've thought about how to approach this issue. There's just a lot to consider here. So bear with me, as this is one of those days where to understand, look, I want to make sure that we understand the totality of the picture here. I want to make sure it's not just about, it is about, don't misunderstand, it is about whether or not this strike is constitutional or whether it needs to have an endorsement of Congress and all that kind of stuff. Certainly is important. I'm not saying that, but we need to understand the full scope of the picture here, because there's two questions, at least two. There's many more than two, but there's at least two basic questions. One is, why are we here? And the other is, what do we do about it? Those are the two big questions to me. So we're going to try to answer those as best we can today. Just appreciate your patience and understanding, as this is a massive, massive issue, as you might imagine. So, before we get started, friends, let's be honest. When your financial world starts getting a little more complicated, you need more than one-size-fits-all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level, offering personalized guidance that goes far beyond the basics, from private equity and private credit to option strategies and coordinated legal planning. Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's all about having a dedicated team guide you each and every step of the way, so you can focus on what matters most to you, your family, your goals, your future. If you want real confidence in your financial life, visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Okay, so Iran's regime is brutal. It's brutal at home in Iran. It's aggressive abroad. It's aggressive with Israel, and it's aggressive with the U.S. And so we have this situation where it's reached, obviously, a boiling point, and underneath all of that lies the nuclear capability that Iran either has currently or is very close to having. And this is waiting, and it's had a spark. It's looking even for, unfortunately, even a larger spark. But the fuel for this problem runs nearly a half century deep, dating back to 1979. So let's first go through what happened over the weekend. We have U.S.-Israeli strikes that began Saturday, February 28th. That's U.S. time. By the way, did you know somebody, I saw this. This is just an FYI. This is not even, I don't think I put this in the stack of stuff, but this is just an FYI that someone had asked different versions of AI when the United States, when Israel would strike Iran. And one of them, I think it was it Grok? I think it was Grok, predicted the actual date of February 28th. Some of them got very close. All of them thought it would be by early to mid-March. Asked OpenAI, which is chat. They asked Grok. I forget the other ones they asked 4 of them. And anyway, but the strikes happened here over the weekend on Saturday. They set a broad target to take out the leadership, the command and control, military infrastructure, and the United States has framed this as an imminent threat. In fact, according to reports from Scott Jennings, he had sources within the administration that had told him that Iran was planning a preemptive strike with ballistic missiles targeting U.S. bases and interests and so forth, Israeli targets as well. And so that's, again, there's conflicting information out there. Some are saying that none of the official briefings from the White House included this. Other reports are saying that this was one of the catalysts, ultimate catalysts here for deciding to make this strike. So, confirmed deaths that happened in these strikes. The Supreme Leader Khamenei, and I got to be careful how I say that because I'm going to reference the historical framework of Iran here today since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And there's a Khomeini as well who we'll talk to. But the current Supreme Leader is was Ali Khamenei, and he has been confirmed dead by U.S. sources, Israeli sources, and Iranian state media. This has been, this is not disputed. They also killed Iran's defense minister. They took out the IRGC, the Iranian, Republican Guard, I believe. Republic Guard, I think, is what that stands for. The leader of that. They took out a senior advisor, a security figure, Ali Khamenei. Other people in the leadership, the chief of staff of the armed forces was also taken out reportedly. Reuters says that Israel said it confirmed 5 other senior military commanders are dead. Trump has made a claim publicly that 48 Iranian leaders were killed. I've seen it reported elsewhere that there were at least 40. It was a massive strike that you could say decapitated the head of the serpent. Al Jazeera has reported, and I think I read this elsewhere, Iranian media saying Khamenei's daughter, his son-in-law, grandson were also killed in the strike. Iran, in response to this, has fired missiles. They've had a retaliation of drones targeting Israel, multiple regional locations where U.S. forces are based. There is reportedly at least 3 servicemen members who have been killed. There are several who have been injured. They have disrupted the Strait of Hormuz, which is in that region of the world where a lot of oil shipments and other shipments would be coming through. So there's of course threats of that becoming even a bigger problem. There's problems with the leadership structure over there now. Obviously, that they have a structure. Look, they know these people, evil or not, which they are evil, not the people of Iran. This is an important distinction. The leaders of Iran are pure evil, but they're not stupid. In fact, they know that they're intelligent about these things, and so they have a very regimented system where they have people who are supposed to replace the people above them in the event that something like this happens. And they're in the process, of course, now of choosing a new supreme leader. They've got a temporary leadership structure that's supposed to be covering the supreme leader's function until the so-called Assembly of Experts selects a successor in Iran. Anyway, that's what's going on. So, massive strike that took out tremendous amounts of leadership, military targets. I believe we even struck at the nuclear facility, which, of course, a lot of this stuff is happening, which is underneath all of this, their ambitions to have a nuclear weapon, which, of course, they insist they don't have. They're simply trying to provide electricity to the people in their country that they abuse and just put under their thumbs as tyrants, as tyrannical, maniacal dictators and lunatics over there. But they promise that that's all they want to use the nuclear technology for. So there is I guess you could say, a cycle of what happens in Iran. There's an uprising of the people because, look, I want to pause here. Friends, we are created. Our founders got this right. We are created to be free. The founders didn't just come up with some, crazy explanation for the way that life is supposed to work this side of heaven. The founders learned. The founders had revealed to them truth about life, truth about the way that we were created, that we are given by our Creator certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have a desire to be free. You can, I know, listen, there is a stage, there is a place you can fall on a political continuum that says, I reject an all-out theocracy. I believe in a free society, but I also have to base my understanding of the world on something. And it stands to reason, I would think, my friends, that I would want my particular understanding of the world to be rooted in truth. I wouldn't want it just to be some made-up, concocted idea. And so we know that, again, I don't want to get too theological or into philosophy too much here, but friends, there's only a couple explanations for the existence of this universe, and truly only one of them is logically sound. So the universe is either eternal, which the laws of second law of thermodynamics basically disproves the idea that the universe is eternal, because one, we are moving from a very highly organized state to one of disorganization. And if it was eternal, if it had an infinite history, by this point on the timeline, if that's even the correct way of thinking about this, we would have reached the point of complete and utter disorganization, to where everything was pure chaos. There would be nothing. There would be no life. Everything would have unraveled completely. So that's not possible. So we're left with two possibilities. Either the universe is self-existent, self-created, or it's created by something that is self-existent. Look, you can go sit down with a pad of paper, you can read books, you can look online. Those are the three options. Universe is eternal, it's self-created, or it's created by something that's self-existent. Now, you could also say the universe is an illusion, But that's only passing the buck one more step, because you say, well, fine, something is having the illusion, and that thing must by definition be self-existent, self-created, or created by something self-existent, which are the three real options. And so we have, my friends, we have the most logical explanation. Of course, self-creation is a logically incoherent argument, because saying something created itself before it existed, one would then ask, well, what did the creating? Well, the thing did. Well, then the thing is either self-existent or it's created by something self-existent, right? So the only thing that makes sense is that there is a being out there, and I firmly believe, by the way, that Yahweh, the God of the Bible, is our creator. I make no mistake. I don't want that to be confused at all. I'm just saying we don't have to get to that point yet. We simply have to say it is the only logical explanation is that someone or something created this. And then you have to then begin to ask yourself, what did that creative being put into place? And you realize through, well, you could say revelation, you could say to some degree following logic and just general curiosity, you begin to understand that we were created for a desire to be free. And so you also realize that humanity has a capacity for great evil, and that humanity, while individually we all want to be free, we also understand that some people have a desire, right? The old saying, absolute power corrupts, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That people in positions of leadership want more power. It's an elixir. There's a lot of things wrong with humanity, and that's explained biblically by the problem of sin, but we have to come to grips with the fact that governments, humanity, has been remarkably bad to one another. People have been remarkably bad to one another over the course of time. And so that's what's happening in the Iranian regime. They have been evil to their people, and they are making their people live in such a way that is contradictory to the way that we were created to live by God. And so, my friends, when that happens, the people will have an uprising, eventually saying, look, I would rather face the consequences of imprisonment, death, whatever, than continue to live like this. And so what the regime does is what the regime knows. They escalate the brutality. They arrest people, they torture people, they kill people, they shut down the internet, they silence speech. They do everything virtually contradictory to what our founders said a government should do. Then eventually they've captured, imprisoned, or killed enough of the people causing the problems in the streets to where once again fear and quiet resume, or people are regrouping to try again. But that pressure continues to build because, again, the leadership is leading the leadership in quotation marks here is leading in such a way so as to create absolute just brutality for the people living under their regime. And eventually the pressure builds again. Eventually there's an uprising, and eventually this thing just continues to spin and spin and spin. And so that's what's been happening in Iran since late December of 2025. Between then and now, there have been thousands of people killed by the Iranian government. Some estimate 7,000 deaths. There's another 11,000 under investigation as far as to whether those were deaths or what happened there. Some people estimate up to 30,000, maybe 36,000 people have been killed by their government. This is hard to independently verify, but this is part of what we are hearing, part of what's out there, that the Iranian people have had an uprising and they have been killed in Tens of thousands of them have been killed. So now they have been shooting people, the regime. They've been using heavy weapons against crowds for crowd control, shooting protesters, hitting bystanders at times. They've had mass arrests, students, organizers, families of the victims. They try to intimidate people. They'll intimidate people at funerals. They try to get a bunch of people to confess and to tattle on each other, report each other. They shut down the internet. They throttle the internet to stop people from being able to organize, communicate. People say that ICE is disappearing people. No, my friends, that's a made-up narrative. What's happening, or disappearing people is actually happening, is in the Islamic Republic of Iran. They don't just try to disperse the crowd or silence the crowd. They try to dismantle the entire human network that created that crowd of opposition to begin with. And having quiet in Iran doesn't mean peace. It can mean fear or the reestablishment of the iron fist that is used by the Iranian leadership. So that's what's going on. Now, does that give us reason to do these strikes? These are other discussions, I understand, but let's set the stage for what we're dealing with here first and foremost. So, I'm going to take a break, my friends. Before I do that, my friends, have you ever felt like the insurance deck is stacked against you? Premiums go up, coverage goes down, and when disaster strikes, you're left proving your case to someone who's never even seen your home. Let's be honest, they've got a vested interest in paying you as little as possible. That's why Claim Haven exists. They document your property before a loss happens. Time-stamped photos and a professional condition report showing the condition of your home. So when the adjuster shows up, there's no guesswork. You got the facts documented. The power, that shifts the power dynamic, and it gives you real leverage. Claim Haven helps restore the balance and puts it back where it belongs, in your hands. Don't wait until it's too late. Take back your proof, your protection, and your peace of mind at claimhaven.club. That's claimhaven.club. My friends, I've got to take a time out. Be back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. You might remember back in 2009 that there was another uprising. I don't want to spend too much time here. And it was in the wake of an election over there. There were post-election protests. The state in Iran cracked down. There were deaths, mass detentions, torture allegations, thousands of people arrested. And there was pressure and calls for Obama to intervene. He did not. By the way, even later on, Obama said that not supporting the folks doing the uprising was a mistake. He admitted that. Listen, I'm not trying to blame. There's plenty of things to blame Obama for. Some of these things are tough. I understand. Let's just understand what we're dealing with here before we start jumping. It just aggravates me to no end with people who have strong opinions on you can have an opinion. Don't misunderstand me. Any American can have an opinion, but it should be an educated one. And that's what we're trying to do here today is to paint the picture. So let's go back in time. Let's go back in time. Back in 1979, pre-1979, this is before the Islamic Revolution. So the Islamic Revolution in Iran happened in 1979. Prior to that, they had a Shah. The Shah's name was Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The culture, the state of Iran at that time was more Western. There was less religious policing, Women were visible in public life. They did still have, it was an authoritarian monarchy. They had a group called the Savak, S-A-V-A-K, like a secret police force. They took political prisoners. There was censorship. Listen, it wasn't good under the Shah. Under the Shah. There's no mistake, but it was better than what we have in the Islamic Republic of Iran, which we've had for the past 47 years. So what happened was, as they modernized and they still didn't have complete political freedom because, again, the secret police, the censorship, the political prisoners, that created backlash pressure, and it made its way through the mosques, through the societal channels. Long story short, of course, there's a lot of information I'm skipping over there, but effectively that led to 1979. And there was mass unrest in Iran. There were labor strikes, work stoppages, especially revolving around the oil industry. Bazaars were shut down. The regime, the Shah, was basically paralyzed. Khomeini, not Khamenei, the individual who just was killed, but Khomeini emerged at the time as kind of the revolutionary leader. The monarchy falls. The Islamic Republic of Iran was installed under clerical supremacy. The first supreme leader was Khomeini, not the dude that just was taken out here over the weekend, who was currently the supreme leader. The first leader was Khomeini. I remember him even as a young kid. I remember seeing him in the news and so forth. But he helped build the model for how the Islamic clerics, the Ayatollahs, would rule with religious legitimacy and political control. They began to institute what is known as Sharia law. This is technically different than a caliphate, but it's very similar. Clerics sit above the politics, the elections. These Ayatollahs, as they're called, the Islamic moral law, if you will, the Quranic law became the state law. And policing was done, by secret police, and just, it was it's been disastrous. Some of the things, women have to wear the hijab, the burqa. Their testimony is worth half of what a man's testimony is. By the way, if you think living as LGBTQIAA plus or whatever the stupid acronym is, if you think you're oppressed here in the United States, go to Iran. Listen, my friends, I'm on record. I don't make any apologies for this. God's creative order is not consistent with the LGBTQ, whatever the other acronym is. It's not. It doesn't mean that those individuals are not loved by God. Of course they are. God desires a relationship with people that are in that movement as much as he does anyone who's not in that movement. In this country, you are free to live as you want, so long as it does not infringe upon the freedoms of other people. And you will never hear me arguing for some law to prevent this, but that's what they have in Iran. I want to actually speak the truth for people to come to the realization and accept the truth on their own, ultimately by receiving the gospel of Jesus Christ and turning from their sin. And we all have it, by the way, my friends. Yours is no worse than mine, vice versa, right? It's just we've all rebelled against our Creator. That's not how it is in the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is incredibly oppressive. If you are found to be homosexual there are legal consequences that could include even death. And again, with women and the women's rights movement, it's crazy to me to listen to these liberals talk about how bad life is here in the United States, how oppressive Trump is, how terrible people like me are for having the opinions I just shared, but yet they have no problem. Apparently, it's just bizarre to the people who are literally harming people for living certain ways, for exposing. If a woman's ankle was exposed, they could be flogged. I mean, it's wild what's been going on over there and how it's defended or at least ignored by the liberals here. Again, this is not necessarily grounds for missile strikes yet, but this is what's there. Then underneath all of this, and I've talked about this previously, this has been a while ago, but Israel and the United States are viewed as the great Satan and the small Satan, or the little Satan, I think. Israel, they call the little Satan. We're the great Satan, the United States, because we're antithetical. At least I commend the Ayatollahs for getting that. That's a lot of people here don't get that difference. We are diametrically opposed. They want to establish Sharia law first in the region of Iran, in the Middle East, and ideally around the globe. They want to have a global caliphate, which I can't get into all of that at the moment, but that's what they desire. Sharia law as the law of the land around the world. That's what they want. And of course, Israel is a Jewish state. It's a nation that God, the God of the Bible, Yahweh, he established the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, and they don't like that Israel has a relationship with a God that they say is not the true God. So there's tension there. Israel would say the same thing about Iran and their God Allah. So there's tension there. There's the story of Abraham and Isaac, which goes back thousands of years ago to the city of Jerusalem. And of course, Muslims say Abraham took Ishmael up the mountain to sacrifice him. The Bible tells us, Christian tradition, Jewish tradition tells us it was Abraham taking Isaac up Mount Moriah to sacrifice him, which is right where the Jewish temple was built in the city of Jerusalem, which is now where the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are today, which are Muslim holy sites. So there's just all this built-in tension. And then you've got the evil of the Iranian regime. They promise, they vow. Khamenei said he wanted to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Ahmadinejad said he wanted to do the same thing. There's lots of this stuff going around. So the tinderbox had been set. It's deeply rooted, and there's a lot of problems there, and I've got to take a time out, my friends. So, friends, there's a lot of confusion out there about kratom. You've probably heard the headlines, and most of those are based on the synthetic junk that just isn't real kratom at all. Real kratom is natural, it's tested, it's handled with care. That's what you get from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. It's a family-run company that partners directly with farmers in Indonesia. Every batch is lab tested for purity, and there are no chemicals, no fillers, no shortcuts in their kratom. This is a trusted herbal option that's been used for generations, and it's a real alternative for people looking for something that doesn't come with a warning label that's a mile long. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff to save 10% off your first order. Visit Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Coupon code Todd Huff. Truth, tradition, transparency, and yes, my friends, time out for me. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. This is one of those days I wish I had a whole lot longer than I do. This will probably continue next week as we continue to talk about developments and all this stuff. I'm doing my best here, my friends. I'm doing my best here. By the way, I will tell you that we'll talk a little bit more about these things in the Inner Circle, which is an email that goes out every day. It's free to subscribe to. Go to toddhuffshow.com to do that. We're actually adding the ability to join that list by text as well, which I'll share here later in the week. But friends, one of the biggest challenges for conservatives like us is finding ways to ensure that our values align with the way that we live our lives, including how we invest our money. That's why I love what the team at 48 Financial is doing. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that don't align with your faith, your values, so you're not funding things that go completely against what you believe in. They do the heavy lifting, helping align your investments with your purpose and your goals. And all you have to do to find out if or to what extent your current investments reflect or align with their values, all you have to do is take a quick and easy assessment at 48financial.com/Todd. That's where you'll find the assessment, my friends, 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, because your money should work for your values. Your money shouldn't certainly be working against your values, my friends. So, all right, where I left off, we're talking about kind of the religious background, the tension here. And listen, that's always been there. That's always going to be there. The competing narrative of sacred traditions, the holy site of Jerusalem, which of course is in Israel. You've got that being a holy site for Christians, Jews, Muslims. You've got the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock. You've got the temple, the side of the temple, right? The Jewish temple, which, by the way, the Jews believed, because this is how God did things in the Old Testament. That was where God lived. That was God's home. You had the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat was, and that's where God's presence resided. I mean, this is serious stuff. It's central to their belief systems. It's, by the way, when God says, or Paul wrote, that your body is the temple, he wasn't saying it's some people use it to, and I understand that there's maybe some analogies there to say to take care of your body. I get that. But your body, God wasn't saying, or Paul wasn't trying to convey that your body is something super special. It's where God resides. It's the new side of the temple. As Christians, through the Spirit of God, he resides in us, not just, I don't mean that in some disrespectful way, but not just in the temple in Jerusalem. He lives in the bodies, the hearts of his believers. And so you got this deep emotional and spiritual gravity that the regime of Iran basically takes that spiritual tension and turns it into state policy to the point where they're willing to kill or proclaim that they're prepared to kill those who disagree with them. That's where you have the chance of death to America, death to Israel. That's where you have the underlying concern about their nuclear program, which, by the way, it makes no sense that this totalitarian regime that has showed zero interest in taking care of its citizens wants to use nuclear energy to help provide power to the people in the countryside. This is clearly a ruse designed to develop nuclear capabilities with which they said they want to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. Make no mistake. Remember, they've wanted to kill, allegedly tried to even assassinate President Trump. There are lots of things that led up to this. We think that they're pursuing a nuclear weapon. Maybe they have the potential already for nuclear weaponry. They've threatened to use that to wipe Israel off the face of the planet. They've threatened to kill, maybe even tried to kill the President of the United States. They've been a menace to society for a long time. They are volatile. They are dangerous. They're a real threat. And then you add to that the possibility that they might take a preemptive strike against military targets. And here we go. That's why we're here. Now, I can't get into it today. We'll talk about this tomorrow, but what should we do? Let's end with that today. What should be done? Right? Do you sit back and let this continue to build? Do you let them get nuclear capabilities? Do you take it on the chin if those reports are true that they are going to strike the United States and Israel preemptively? Do you just take that on the chin? Where do you draw the line? Of course, what's the role constitutionally of the President of the United States? What can he do? What can he not do constitutionally? There is the War Powers Act. You've got Congress. Of course, all the Democrats, with the exception of Fetterman, are pretty much saying that Trump shouldn't have done it. You have most of the Republicans that so far are standing by him for some of the reasons I'm saying here. And you got some like Thomas Massey, who I like in a lot of ways, but he's also, I think, wrong at times. There's the commander-in-chief, then there's the power to declare war in the legislative body, the commander-in-chief, of course, being the president. Anyway, we'll talk about these things tomorrow. I'm just out of time. Friends, it's good to be back. Thanks for listening. SDG.